Actually, I'd like to address the question that was raised by Congresswoman Gwen Moore from Wisconsin. I'd like to pose a question to her. And this question is going to take a little build-up, so bear with me.
Okay.
Now, if you were responsible for deregulating the markets, and you were responsible for unleashing the wildest impulses in human nature, greed among them, and if you presided over a catastrophic increase in the budget deficit as you cut taxes for the wealthiest Americans, and if you let loose a war that should never have been fought in Iraq, why, after it all came crashing down, wouldn't you be looking for somebody to blame? Well, you might just blame the people who are most vulnerable in our economy, and that is what is at the very root of the CRA mess. You can't possibly expect people to accept responsibility. You can't possibly expect them to say, look, when you look at these cross lines here, this is when the party opposite ran the whole shooting match. This is when they had the White House and this House and the other body in the Senate, and they ran the whole shooting match, and we got a big, fat, enormous, giant goose egg out of it as it relates to any kind of financial regulation. But as soon as the 110th Congress breaks out, when we finally got a chance to do some regulation, what did we see? Through this House, we passed the shareholder vote on executive pay, so-called say on pay. If you are upset, frustrated, angry, or in any way annoyed by the AIG scandal with executive pay or any of this stuff, you can know and feel good about the fact that it was the Democratic Congress in the Financial Services Committee under the leadership of Barney Frank that passed say on pay that said, you know what, we're going to let those investors have a say-so over these executive pay packages. We're going to do that. That was passed in the 110th Congress, but it wasn't made law, but it was passed through this 110th Congress. But not only that, we did pass legislation to bring in regulation and oversight over in the Office of the Federal Housing Enterprise Oversight. This was OFEO was moved out, and the Federal Housing Finance Agency was moved in, so that yes, the problems that the gentleman from Massachusetts identified with Fannie and Freddie were there. They did buy too many of these mortgage-backed securities, but what happened in the 110th Congress? We responded. We did something. We did not leave it to go untended. But not only that, we passed the Credit Card Holders Bill of Rights in 2008. And we passed it again, and we're going to pass it again on the House floor tomorrow. And I'm so excited about that. But let me just say something about that when as we slow down and talk about it. While we're debating the bill on the floor today, we have a good friend of mine, a gentleman who I actually quite enjoy listening to, a gentleman from Texas. He's a fine man, but he's fond of saying, okay, you guys are talking about predatory lending, but what about predatory borrowing? You've heard this phrase, right? Well, let's talk about predatory borrowing for a minute. When somebody gets an extra amount of money called a yield spread premium to steer you to a high-cost loan, and it makes them money to do so, that's how you get people getting into loans they're not supposed to get into. They get into loans because the people they trust, the mortgage originators who they rely on, are incentivized to do so. What are we doing about it? Under the 111th Congress, we're addressing this practice right now to try to say, no, if you are, it's your job to look out for the borrower. You got to look out for the borrower. You can make more money by doing a lot of loans. You can make more money doing bigger loans, but you can't make more money simply by steering someone to a high-cost loan. That is going on now. We passed the Credit Card Holders Bill of Rights in 2008, and we're going to pass it again very soon, and God willing, it will be law in the very near future. But not only that, the gentleman from Colorado talked about passage of the Neighborhood Stabilization Act. This is a bill that directed the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development to make loans to qualified states, metropolitan cities, and urban areas in accordance with HUD-approved grants to carry out eligible housing stimulus activities, which included greenification, is that a word? Greening, renewable energy, and also buying up houses so that you wouldn't have these vacant, boarded up places that were an attractive nuisance for everything but from arson to young people getting dragged into these places and copper strippers and all the rest. I submit today that the Democratic Congress, since we became the majority, has been actively engaged in financial regulation. We have been actively engaged in trying to look out for the American consumer. We have been trying to bring stability and liquidity to the financial markets. And I would submit that the 110th Congress and the 111th Congress, the majority has demonstrated, and some Republicans have been smart enough to vote with us, and said, look, yes, America is a free market society. We believe in the generative power of markets. We believe markets should be allowed to run, but we know that human nature needs some restraint sometimes, and we need to have some rules to this game, and thank goodness this is happening right now. So look forward to the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which put real financial change in, the Credit Card Holder Bill of Rights of 2009, and the Mortgage Reform and Anti-Predatory Lending Act, which was passed in 2007, but hopefully will come law in the weeks to come, and which we should be on the House floor in the very near future. That's what I call being a good steward. That's what I call being a financial leader, and that's what I call the leadership of Barney Frank from Massachusetts. I'm proud to be on the committee.